one day this week that was great, weather-wise. Do you remember it? It was like 60 plus. I was like, I have to take my coat off. It was warm. It was warm in my car. Like I used the AC, which it doesn't take me long. So, but anyway, I flip it on. I'm enjoying the music really loud and the open windows and enjoying like, wow, this feels like that weather that I remembered that has been gone so long and hurts our hearts to not have with us, right? So, of course, I mean, I'm the one who chooses to live in the Pacific Northwest, so that's on me. But I was a happy man, and I loved when I saw the temperature break 60. It was just really exciting. Whenever you get a warm day, it starts making you think about the things that you love doing, right? Like for some of you, you love gardening or hiking or camping or just being outside, maybe playing soccer or doing something where you're outdoors. And one of the things I like to do is fish. I enjoy being just fishing. Really, I just enjoy the peace of being by the water. And catching fish is a bonus, and it's the hope, and it's the goal. And it is the primary goal, but in some ways it's secondary. I just love the moments on the water, and I love those moments. So we're going to spend, like Ben said, we're going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about who is in your boat. And actually, we're just going to take 3 weeks on one part of one chapter and just look at these small parts week by week. So I'm going to read the whole passage, but then we'll take today's time to digest only the first part of it. So if you're taking notes, we're in Luke chapter 5 today, verses 1 through 11. Luke 5, 1 through 11. And it reads, "One day as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. He saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, 'Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch.' Simon answered, 'Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets.' When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, 'Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man.' For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, 'Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people.' So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed them." This is such a powerful moment in this man's life to see the miraculous, to walk from his livelihood and just pursue Jesus. And like I said, we're just going to focus on that first part. So actually, we're taking it slow today and just getting to where Jesus actually gets in his boat. Now, like I said, I enjoy fishing. I do love seeing when the pole really dips hard, which means like something's on. That's exciting. And how many of you like to fish? Can we just take a quick survey? Yeah. Okay. How many of you pray when you fish? Okay. It's more of the honest people. How many of you pray under your breath? Like, please, please, please. Okay. Now, what I love, when I fish, I pray. And what I mean by that is often I like to go alone to a bridge that's by my house. There's not a lot to catch there, and the dimensions on what you can keep is large enough to keep you from fishing there, but I love it. And I love it for a couple reasons. It's got beautiful fog and sunrises. There's a family of otters that live down there, so they're fun to watch. They're probably why I can't catch any fish, but I try. And then I love to pray down there. I love to just be alone with Jesus and think about life and share life with him as I'm praying. And just watch my bobber kind of ease down. And not much happens, but I don't need it to at that moment for me. And sometimes I admit I have prayed for fish. There was this one day that was really strange. And if you don't know me, I'm tangential, so off we go. I found a rabbit trail. Me and my nephew and my son, or actually my brother, we were down fishing, and nothing was happening at all. Not a bite, not a movement, not anything. And we started talking about old songs, and he said, oh, do you remember this one song? And we played it on his phone. And as soon as we played it, like my bobber just went like flying under the surface. And I said, keep that song on, like joking. And I caught a fish, and that was fun. And then we're fishing in nothing, and we're talking, and he said, maybe I should play that song again. I went, yeah, wouldn't that be fun? And he did, and then my bobber started moving. And so we just called that was the song that caught fish. And I don't know if the song was so bad that they were trying to that's it, just put a hook in me like I can't stand the song, or if they were like, that's a great song, I want to come up and listen. Or if it was just coincidence, which could be. Either way, fun moments fishing. And to me, it always struck me as odd. And my nephew and I still talk about that, like, hey, let's go fishing and get that song out. But I do admit I have prayed for fish. I've tried weird things like that. It's only weird if it doesn't work, okay? So if it works, it's not weird. It's a strategy. I'm sure Peter probably, too, spent some of his time praying for fish. And we know that this was a disappointing day because he told Jesus so. He said, we fished all night and caught nothing. But we have this great moment. The moment with Jesus is a moment where Jesus is close to this lake, and he's teaching others, and people are captivated, so much so that they were crowded in on him, so intent to hear his words of life. And he needed some room to be able to speak. And actually, being out on the water would almost cause like a nice, it would work in his advantage. Speaking, you can just see his words gliding across the water to them. So Jesus sees these boats there left by fishermen who had just come in off this bum run, right? And Jesus has Simon Peter. He gets in his boat. He doesn't ask him if he can use his boat. He just gets in his boat and asks Simon to push out a little so that he wouldn't be crowded in on as he taught. So Simon Peter says, no problem, and get out there. And then he reorients himself in the boat to face the crowd. And he sits down and continues to teach. And I absolutely love this moment because Jesus just plants himself right in the middle of Peter's business. He just gets right to the core of what Peter's about and steps right in. The Jews in this time, they know where the spiritual stuff happens. And actually, Ben alluded to this a little. Where does the spiritual stuff happen for us? Here, right? Sundays in this formal setting that we have declared holy. But for them, they knew where the spiritual stuff happened. It happened in the temple in Jerusalem. And this is not untrue, by the way. That was God's design. And the temple was designed by God to be a place that where his people could come and honor him and learn and experience his presence. And actually, the design of the temple, you can see is based on this idea that God had, even all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where there's Eden and this garden and this tree of life. In the same way, you have this beautiful temple and then the inner courts and then the Holy of Holies. And God is creating this picture that shows us being able to come into what he created that's good and then come deeply into a relationship with him where his presence fills us and transforms us, where we enjoy life with God. And so the temple was a picture and something God created. But Jesus, of course, coming as man, as the Son of Man, comes to break things up and help people understand more about the heart of God. So what he does is he plants himself in this earthly, normal, everyday spot. And this was a Jesus specialty. In fact, I encourage you, read through the Gospels and watch how many times he goes and does some of his best work in the most ordinary spaces. He went into these places and had these impactful moments in people's everyday business all the time. He just planted himself. So he would plant himself in people's homes. In fact, so much so that he would audaciously say things like, hey, I'm coming to your house for lunch. Like, try that out on somebody and see how it goes. They have to be really flexible to be able to walk up and say, hey, I'm coming to your house for lunch today. You should probably get something ready. But he spent time in people's homes. He would impact people right on a hillside. We see lakeside, a market, a boat, even a Samaritan water hole. In fact, at that Samaritan watering hole, he has this powerful conversation once with a Samaritan woman there. And it relates to this idea of him stepping into our everyday lives. He asks her, as they're having a conversation, he said, where should believers worship God? And she said, actually, that's a point of contention between us Samaritans and you Jews, because where should it be? Because, and I'd like an answer from you, Jesus. We say it should be here on the mountain, speaking of Mount Gerizim. And said, but you Jews say it's the temple, so where should it be? Give me the answer. And I imagine he's standing at that well, just thinking, it's right here in this everyday, ordinary space that I'm breaking into in your life. And he tells her so. His answer breaks this divide that mankind has created between secular space and spiritual space. And in John 4:23, here's what his answer is. A time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. He says, do you know where the place to worship God is? It's right here. I'm breaking into your world. God sees you, knows you, loves you, and in this moment, it's made holy by you recognizing the presence of God. And so in similar fashion, Jesus just jumps right into Peter's boat. And another fascinating thing about this moment, the boat represents everything about Peter's life. If you jumped in my boat, you'd be jumping into just like my hobby, something I'm not great at, something I enjoy, but something that I actually want to sell on Craigslist, or if any of you are interested, talk to me afterwards. Okay, it's just a little rowboat with a dent in it, and you can have it for a deal, okay? I'll even throw in a life jacket or whatever you need, okay? But if he jumped into my boat, well, first he'd say, this is dirty, like, clean this thing. But then he would say, this is just a hobby I'm jumping into. He's jumping into the middle of Peter's everything, Peter's world, Peter's life, and Jesus gets in the middle of it, and then he faces the crowd. He reorients himself in the boat and continues teaching the crowd. And I think this is such a beautiful picture of our everyday lives. And as we see in the whole text, Jesus changes the trajectory of Peter's life. He goes from being a fisherman to dropping everything and following after Christ. But it starts with him getting in his boat and simply turning around. And the big idea here is that Jesus wants to get in the middle of our boat, our lives, and then reorient us to see what he's truly focused on. See, the problem isn't the boat, and Jesus didn't have a problem with Peter's boat. If anything, the problem was just, that I see, is just which way it was facing and who wasn't in it. It was that Peter was off living his life and doing his thing, and Jesus wanted to transform that. And everything changes for Peter because of this moment. And this moment begins with Jesus climbing into his boat. I like stopping there. Actually, I wanted to preach on this whole chapter, but I liked today just being about him breaking into Peter's space, for this week at least. And here's why. Because for many of us, we know that the next few weeks we're going to see Peter take bigger steps and great things happen in his life. He follows Jesus' instructions, and we're going to look at that next week, that he follows Jesus' instructions when they make absolutely no sense and sees great things happen. He leaves his fishing business behind, and he responds to this adventurous call to follow after a rabbi as one of his disciples. But do you see how this all starts? It all starts with a moment of Jesus stepping into the middle of his world and saying, push off and let's turn around and look at what I'm truly focused on. It's Jesus stepping into his boat. So I want to turn this to think about us now for the next few minutes. For followers of Jesus, it is so crucial that we see that Jesus is stepping right into our ordinary life to live life with us, that we are called to be with him. Not just to learn about him and not just to be for him like we're fans, but with him because he calls us friends and he calls us family, sons and daughters of God. So a life following after Jesus isn't only about saying things like, what would Jesus do? How many of you have heard that sentence? What would Jesus do? Right? Okay. Do you remember the bracelets? Any of you recall the bracelets? Do you remember where it came from? It came from a book called In His Steps by Charles Sheldon, where a group of people started asking themselves, what would Jesus do? And then they started applying that to everything. And then it became this really big youth ministry thing where teens everywhere were wearing do the initials for me, WWJD. Yeah, there we go. Wow. All right. We should do how would Sean spell or something like that, but nobody's gonna wear that bracelet. But so that was a big thing, and teens everywhere, asking what would Jesus do? And it's a great question, by the way, but we could add another good question, which was, what did Jesus do? Because there's so much information simply about how he lived and how he loved, that we could spend our lives simply looking at his life and emulating it. But another great question is, what is Jesus doing? What is Jesus doing right now in my life? What is Jesus doing in my heart? Not that we would be objective in looking at life and thinking, well, what would Jesus do? That is a great question. But see, Jesus is stepping into the ordinary boat of our lives, and we simply must respond to this by saying, what is he doing? What is he doing in me right now? It starts with your very own boat, so that we think about what is going on in our own lives of faith. Remember, we don't live our lives for him as much as we do with him. In fact, I've been meditating on this one verse quite a bit, and it's 2 Peter 1:3. It is a powerful verse. It says that his divine power has given us everything that we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. So all I need for this godly life isn't found just in knowledge. And we know this to be true because the internet gives everyone in the world all the knowledge they need, and we're just as jacked up as ever. But the power that we experience living life with Jesus as we grow in that knowledge, it's the transforming power of his Spirit in our lives as we focus on his truth. It's the day-to-day with God that his power gives us all we need for this godly life. So what is your boat? I want you to just think about that, and you can just answer your own, like in your own mind, what is your boat? It could be your home. It could be your work truck that are jam-packed with tools right now. It could be your cubicle at work. It could be your register that you serve at. It could be room 102 or your homeroom at school or at college. It might be your kitchen where you find yourself preparing daily for your family. It could be your gym where you're working hard to get swole, and that's your boat. We all have our boat, though. Friends, we all have our boat, and it's the everyday place where Jesus is stepping into, where we recognize his presence and we reorient ourselves to what he is focused on. So that first thought is what is your boat? And then secondly, is Jesus in the middle of your boat? Because just like Peter, I believe that Jesus wants us to get out of this dichotomy of God over here and my other stuff over here. I give God Sundays. The rest of the week I kind of have my things. See, God loves to invade space. He doesn't see a dichotomy where this is sacred, this is secular. He simply looks at the whole world and says, it's mine and everything in it. I created it for goodness, and I created it to know you and be known by you. And so he wants us to break out of this dichotomy. My God stuff over here and my other stuff over there. He loves bleed over. And he meets us in the middle of our boat, and once in it, he reorients us to see what he is focused on. Which means that you're not leaving your school, right? Like some of you, in other words, like you students, like please don't go home and tell your parents, like, all I could figure out was Pastor Sean was saying that like Peter left his business to follow after Jesus. I'm supposed to drop college and follow after Jesus. Like, I do not want to hear that call from your parents. Or if I hear that call, like, I'm going to let them know that was not my idea. That was just them trying to, I don't know, do something new and fresh. And you're not quitting your job today, correct? You still have kids at home to feed, right? Or you still have a spouse to work alongside, or people at your job to manage or work for or work with. You still have responsibilities, but I have good news. You don't have to desert them and live monk life in order to experience Jesus life. Because Jesus steps into the boat. He steps into everyday, ordinary life with us and calls us to live life with him and let him reorient what we're focused on. So instead, begin to name these places holy ground and invite Jesus into your everyday moments. When you go to work together tomorrow, go a few minutes early, walk into that space and recognize this is a moment that Jesus has stepped into. It's holy because he's holy. He's here. This space is sacred because the whole earth is the Lord's. And he's right here in this moment. When you wake up early tomorrow and you begin to crack eggs and make breakfast, you can stop and say, this is a space that Jesus has stepped into. And I just have a few thoughts, closing thoughts for reflection. So this is for your boat, okay? And that could be school, work, home, farm, commute, neighborhood, wherever your boat is that you've been thinking of. And I just have 4 thoughts with that. 1, invite Jesus into your everyday moment. And so what I'm saying is be aware. Invite Jesus into that moment. Like you students, as you're getting ready to walk onto campus, you can just be walking onto campus going, Lord, I invite you, walk in here with me into this moment. Invite Jesus into your everyday moments. Second, ask Jesus to show you how your everyday moments can be filled with his presence and purpose. And why that's such a powerful prayer is he's going to do like he did in turning towards the shore. He's going to reorient your focus to what he's focused on. What was he focused on in the boat? The people who needed his words of life, the people who needed hope, help, and healing. Jesus will reorient you as you pray. Third, listen for the answer, because God will speak to you. And then 4, do something new this week. Do something new this week. Why I say that is, I have found as I pray and think about my life with Jesus, I often default to a few things that I do that are normal. Try something new this week that gets you out of the rut of thinking, these are my Jesus times, my God times, and these are my other times. Break something up and do completely something new to get your mind out of the rut of your daily and recognize that ordinary moment as a Jesus moment.